At our wedding reception, right in the middle of the head table, I saw my husband slip a packet of white powder into my champagne glass. He thought he was being subtle. He thought the massive centerpiece of white hydrangeas and orchids blocked my line of sight, but he made a rookie mistake. He forgot about the reflection in the polished silver butter knife sitting right next to his hand. I did not gasp. I did not scream. I simply waited. Trevon turned away for a split second to wave at his college fraternity brothers who were making a scene by the bar. In that single heartbeat, I reached out and switched our glasses. It was the smoothest move of my life. When he turned back, I was smiling, my hands folded demurely in my lap, looking like the perfect blushing bride he thought he had trapped. He stood up, tapping his spoon against his glass to silence the room of 300 guests. He looked handsome in his custom tuxedo, that charming, lying smile plastered on his face. He raised the glass. My glass, too. My beautiful wife, Solange, he boomed, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. You are the rock of my life. Tonight marks the beginning of us taking care of each other forever. Drink up, baby. He tipped the glass back and drained it in one long swallow. I watched his throat move. I watched the poison or whatever sedative he had cooked up enter his system. I raised my own glass, the safe one, and took a polite sip. Then I leaned in close, pretending to kiss his cheek for the cameras. Wrong glass. Darling, I whispered. Sleep tight. His eyes went wide. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a curtain falling. He tried to speak, to call for help, but his knees buckled. He crashed backward into the table, taking the expensive china and the wedding cake down with him. The room erupted in screams, but the loudest scream came from his sister-in-law. Courtney. She pointed a manicured finger straight at my face and shrieked. She killed him. She poisoned him. Arrest her. Before I tell you exactly what Courtney tried to do to me when the police arrived, and the secret I found in Trevon's pocket while the paramedics were working on him, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you have ever had to outsmart a partner who thought you were the fool, hit that like and subscribe button. You are going to want to see how this plays out. My name is Solange, and for the last 2 years, Trevon and his family have treated me like a charity case. They think I am just a freelance archivist, a glorified librarian who organizes old papers for a living. They think I scrape by on $40,000 a year. They have no idea that I am the founder of Archangel Data, a forensic auditing firm that cleans up messes for Fortune 500 companies. They have no idea that my net worth is hovering around $60 million. And they definitely have no idea that I know exactly why Trevon wanted me unconscious on our wedding night. The chaos in the ballroom was deafening. Paramedics were ripping open Trevon's shirt. Courtney was practically hanging off a police officer's arm, using her tears and her father's political connections to demand my immediate arrest. She looked at me with that familiar mix of disgust and superiority. Courtney was the kind of woman who smiled to your face but checked her purse when you walked into the room. Officer, look at her. Courtney yelled, pointing at me. She is not even crying. She did this. She put something in his drink. I saw her hand move. Search her. Search her right now. The officer, a tired-looking man who clearly did not want to be dealing with rich people, drama, walked over to me. Ma'am, I need to ask you to step aside. Did you witness what happened? I stood tall. My dress was silk, simple and elegant, unlike the bedazzled monstrosity my mother-in-law Patricia had wanted me to wear. I looked the officer in the eye. My husband has a history of fainting spells due to low blood sugar. I lied smoothly. He has been under a lot of stress with his company's merger. I have nothing to hide. You can search my purse. You can search me. I handed over my small clutch. Courtney watched with a hawk's eye, hoping to see a vial of poison or a receipt for cyanide. The officer dumped the contents onto the tablecloth. A lipstick, a compact mirror, a packet of tissues, and a breath mint. That was it. Courtney's face turned blotchy red. She must have hidden it, she screeched. Do a full body search. Do not let her leave. My father is Senator Miller, and I will have your badge if you let this attempted murderer walk away. The mention of the senator made the officer stiffen. He looked at me apologetically, but I could see the shift. He had to take this seriously now. Ma'am, I am going to need you to empty your pockets if you have any, and let a female officer pat you down. Just to be safe. I nodded calmly. Of course, officer. Whatever you need to clear this up. A female officer stepped forward. Patting down my wedding dress was ridiculous, but I let them do it. I raised my arms, letting the silk drape around me. I caught my reflection in the mirror across the room. I looked like a statue, unbothered, untouchable. The female officer shook her head at her partner. Nothing. She is clean. Courtney let out a noise that sounded like a dying cat. But I saw it. I know I saw it. She must have dropped it under the table. Check under the table. While the officers wasted time crawling on the floor looking for phantom evidence, the paramedics were loading Trevon onto a stretcher. His breathing was shallow and he was completely unconscious, frothing slightly at the mouth. It was not a lethal dose. I knew exactly what chemical compound it was because my company had investigated a corporate espionage case involving the same drug last month. It was a powerful hypnotic sedative. It knocks you out for 6 hours and leaves you suggestible and confused when you wake up. Perfect for getting someone to sign a power of attorney document. They would never agree to sober. I walked over to the stretcher playing the role of the concerned wife. Is he going to be okay? I asked the paramedic, holding his hand just tight enough to look comforting, but loose enough to feel no pulse of love left in my body. He is stable, but unresponsive, the paramedic said. We need to get him to St. Jude's immediately. Are you coming with us, ma'am? Before I could answer, my mother-in-law, Patricia, pushed past me, nearly knocking me over in her haste. She was wearing a gold, sequined gown that cost more than my car, supposedly, but I knew for a fact her credit card had been declined at the florist yesterday. I am going, Patricia announced, glaring at me. You stay here. Solange, you have done enough damage with your bad energy. This is a family matter. I watched them wheel him out. The sirens wailed, fading into the night. The guests were whispering, staring at me with a mix of pity and suspicion. Courtney was still haranguing the police officer, insisting they confiscate the wine glasses for testing. I smiled internally. Go ahead, test the glasses. Courtney. The glass Trevon drank from was the one set at my place setting. The fingerprints on it would be mine and his. The glass at his setting was untouched. It would be a forensic nightmare to prove anything, especially since I had already palmed the empty packet of powder from the table when I stood up to help him. I felt a vibration in the hem of my dress, hidden in a small pocket sewn into the lining. It was my burner phone, the one only my head of security and my lawyer knew about. I walked calmly towards the exit, ignoring the stairs I needed to get to the hospital, not to hold Trevon's hand, but to make sure he didn't wake up and spin a narrative before I could get the truth. As I walked past Courtney, she hissed at me. This is not over. You might have fooled the police, but you do not fool me. You are trash, Solange, and we are going to flush you out. I stopped and looked at her coolly. I did not raise my voice. I did not get angry. I just smoothed the silk of my skirt. Courtney, I said softly, your mascara is running. You look like a raccoon. Maybe you should go fix that before the press arrives. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving her sputtering with rage. The game had officially begun, and they had no idea they were playing against the house. The fluorescent lights of the St. Jude's emergency waiting room hummed with a sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper on glass. It was a stark contrast to the soft jazz and clinking crystal of the ballroom we had just left. I was still wearing my wedding dress. The silk, once cool and luxurious against my skin, now felt heavy and suffocating. The hem was stained with dirt from the ambulance bay, a gray smear on the pristine white that felt like a perfect metaphor for my marriage. I sat on one of the hard vinyl chairs, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. I refused to slouch. I refused to cry. Across the room, my mother-in-law Patricia was pacing back and forth like a caged tiger wearing Chanel. Her heels clicked sharply against the linoleum floor, a rhythmic staccato that echoed in the empty corridor. Every few seconds, she would stop, glare at me, and then resume her pacing. She was muttering to herself, whipping herself up into a frenzy. Finally, she snapped. She marched across the room, her gold bracelets jangling aggressively. She stopped right in front of me, blocking the overhead light, casting a long, jagged shadow over my face. You are poison, she hissed. I looked up at her calmly. Her face was contorted with rage, her heavy makeup settling into the deep lines around her mouth. Excuse me, Patricia, I said, my voice steady. You heard me. she spat. "You are bad luck, Solange. You have always been bad luck. Since the day Trevon brought you home with your cheap shoes and your quiet little attitude, everything has gone wrong. And now this. My son is in there fighting for his life on his wedding night because of you." She raised her hand. It was a reflex, a motion born of entitlement and years of unchecked aggression. She intended to slap me right across the face. In her mind, I was nothing more than a servant, a punching bag to absorb her stress. But her hand never made contact. I moved with a speed that startled even me. I caught her wrist in midair just inches from my cheek. My grip was firm, unyielding. I did not squeeze hard enough to bruise, but I held her there, suspended in her own violence. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was low, barely a whisper, but it carried a weight that made her eyes widen. "Do not ever touch me again." For a second, the air between us crackled. She tried to yank her hand back, but I held it for 1 second longer, just to let the power dynamic shift before releasing her. She stumbled back a step, clutching her wrist as if I had burned her. "How dare you!" she gasped, her chest heaving. "You insolent little—" Before she could finish her slur, the double doors swung open. A hospital administrator, a woman with a kind face and a clipboard that looked far too heavy, walked toward us. She looked exhausted, but her professional mask was firmly in place. "Family of Trevon Davis," she called out softly. Patricia shoved past me, smoothing her dress instantly, transforming from a brawling fishwife into the grieving matriarch. "That is me. I am his mother. Is he awake? Is my son all right?" The administrator offered a tight smile. "He is stable, Mrs. Davis. The doctors are running some toxicology screens and monitoring his vitals. We have moved him to the VIP suite on the 4th floor as per the request noted in his file. However, before we can proceed with any specialized treatments or allow visitors, we need to handle the admission paperwork and the deposit for the private room." Patricia waved her hand dismissively as if the concept of payment was beneath her. Of course. Just put it on Trevon's account. He has the Platinum American Express on file. Just run it. I want the best doctors. I want the chief of medicine." The administrator looked down at her clipboard, shifting her weight uncomfortably. She cleared her throat. "Actually, Mrs. Davis, we tried to run the card on file, the one ending in 4098. It was declined." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Patricia froze. Her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. "That is impossible," she sputtered. "That is a black card. It has no limit. You must have entered it wrong. Try it again." "We tried it 3 times, ma'am," the administrator said gently. "The bank flagged it as closed due to outstanding delinquency. We also tried a secondary Visa card we found in his wallet. That one was also declined for insufficient funds." I watched Patricia's face turn a shade of purple that clashed horribly with her gold dress. This was the reality I had known for months, the reality they were all trying so desperately to hide. The Davis family empire was a house of cards built on debt and delusion. Trevon did not just forget his wallet. He was broke. They were all broke. "Well, this is ridiculous." Patricia snapped, her voice rising an octave. "It is clearly a banking error. It is Sunday night. The systems are probably down. Do you know who we are? My son is a CEO. I demand you override it." "I cannot do that, ma'am," the administrator said, her patience thinning. "The VIP suite requires a $5,000 deposit up front. Otherwise, we will have to move him to a shared room in the general ward." "A shared room?" Patricia shrieked. "With common people? Absolutely not. My son needs privacy." "Then we need a valid form of payment," the administrator said firmly. Patricia turned to Courtney, who was standing near the vending machines with her husband Julian. "Courtney, give them your card. We will sort this out with the bank in the morning." Courtney froze. She clutched her designer purse tighter to her chest. Her eyes darted around the room. I did not bring my cards." Patricia Courtney lied. Her voice was high and tight. "I left my wallet in the limo. I only have my ID." It was a lie. I could see the outline of her wallet in her bag. Courtney was not about to sink $5,000 into a sinking ship. Julian Trevon's brother suddenly found the floor very interesting. "We can't put him in a general ward," Patricia wailed, looking around helplessly. "This is humiliating." I stood up. The sound of my silk dress rustling drew their attention. I walked over to the administrator, my movements slow and deliberate. I reached into my small clutch and pulled out my debit card. It was an old blue card from a credit union, the plastic peeling at the corners, the chip looking worn out. It looked like the card of a struggling woman living paycheck to paycheck. "I will pay it," I said softly. Patricia let out a short bark-like laugh. "You—" She looked at me with pure derision. "You are going to pay $5,000 with what Solange Your Library fines money. That card probably has a daily limit of $50. Do not embarrass us further." I ignored her. I handed the card to the administrator. "Please try this one," I said. The administrator took it, looking skeptical. She slid it into the portable terminal she was holding. We all watched the screen. Patricia had a smirk on her face, ready to pounce the moment the word declined appeared. Courtney rolled her eyes and whispered something to Julian. The machine beeped. Approved. The administrator looked relieved. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis. The receipt is printing now." Patricia's jaw dropped. She looked from the machine to me, and then at my battered card as I took it back. "There went your rent money for the year," she sneered, recovering quickly. "I hope you enjoy eating instant noodles for the next 6 months. You are trying so hard to buy your way into this family, aren't you?" "It is pathetic." I did not answer. I simply tucked the card back into my clutch. In my head, I visualized the balance of that specific account. It was my play money account. It had a balance of $200,000. The $5,000 barely scratched the interest it had earned that month alone. But to them, I had just sacrificed my life savings. "We can go up to the room now," the administrator said. Patricia shoulder-checked me as she hurried toward the elevators. "You wait here, Solange. Family only for the first hour. I do not want you upsetting him when he wakes up." I let them go. I sat back down in the hard chair. I needed them to think I was defeated. I needed them to think I was weak. 10 minutes passed. I leaned my head back against the wall and closed my eyes, letting my breathing slow down. I must have looked like I was dozing off, exhausted from the trauma of the night. I heard the elevator ding. Footsteps approached. It was Courtney and Julian. They had come back down, probably to get coffee or make calls away from Patricia's hysteria. They sat in the row of chairs directly behind me, back to back with my row. They assumed I was asleep. They assumed I was irrelevant. "Can you believe she actually paid it?" Courtney whispered. Her voice was sharp, venomous. Julian sighed. "It doesn't matter. $5,000 is a drop in the bucket. We need $2 million, Courtney, by Friday. Or the logistics company goes under. And if the company goes under, Dad's campaign financing gets audited." I kept my breathing steady. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I remained perfectly still. I know, Courtney hissed. "That is why we need the power of attorney. Did you talk to the doctor?" "Yeah," Julian said. His voice was lower, more nervous. "He said the sedative will leave Trevon confused for at least 24 hours. He will be pliable. He won't remember what he is signing. We just need to get Solange out of the room." "She is not the problem," Courtney said. "She is an idiot. Did you see her hand over that debit card? She probably thinks she is a hero. The problem is the timeline. We need to liquidate his assets immediately. We need to sell that apartment of hers." "Technically, it is her apartment," Julian whispered. "It is in her name. Trevon never got her to put him on the deed." "That doesn't matter," Courtney snapped. "That is what the power of attorney is for. If Trevon signs it declaring he has spousal authority, we can leverage the property. We can take out a hard money loan against it. By the time she realizes what happened, we will have the cash, the company will be saved, and she can deal with the foreclosure. Who cares? She is used to being poor. She will bounce back. Or she won't. Not our problem." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This was not just about greed. This was predatory. They were planning to steal my grandmother's home, the only tangible thing I had left of my past, to cover their own failures. They were going to defraud a bank, forge documents, and ruin my credit, all while I sat 10 feet away from them. "We have to make sure she doesn't read the papers," Julian said. "She won't read them." Courtney scoffed. "Look at her. She is asleep. She is weak, Julian. She is desperate for us to like her. I will tell her it is a medical release form or an insurance document. She will sign whatever I tell her to sign because she is terrified of Patricia. They both laughed. It was a soft, cruel sound. "Let's go get some coffee," Courtney said. "Then we go back up. We get Trevon to sign first, then we ambush her." I heard them stand up and walk away toward the cafeteria. I opened my eyes. The waiting room was empty again. I stared at the blank white wall in front of me. A single tear rolled down my cheek, but it was not from sadness. It was from pure crystallized rage. They wanted a signature. They wanted access to my assets. They wanted to play a game of legal chess. I reached into the hidden pocket of my dress and pulled out my phone. I saw a message from Jessica, my head of security. "Gavel is ready. We have the files. Say the word." I typed back 2 words. "Execute Icarus." I stood up and smoothed out the wrinkles in my dress. I was done being the victim. I was done being the scapegoat. If they wanted a war over finances, I would give them a war. But I wasn't going to use a debit card this time. I was going to use the entire weight of Archangel data to crush them into dust. I walked toward the elevators. It was time to go visit my husband. The heavy door of the hospital restroom clicked shut behind me, and the sound of the locking mechanism sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I had heard all night. The room smelled of antiseptic lemon cleaner and cold porcelain. It was sterile. It was quiet. It was exactly what I needed. I walked over to the row of sinks and gripped the cold marble counter. I stared at my reflection in the expansive mirror. The woman staring back at me looked like a tragedy. Her mascara was slightly smudged from where I had dabbed at my dry eyes earlier. Her expensive silk dress was wrinkled. She looked like a terrified bride whose husband was clinging to life. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water rush over my hands. Then I looked up again, and the transformation happened. It was instantaneous. The worry drained from my eyes, replaced by a steel gaze that had terrified boardrooms across Atlanta. The slump in my shoulders vanished. I straightened my spine, standing to my full height. Solange, the victim, was gone. Solange, the CEO of Archangel Data, had entered the room. I reached into the hidden lining of my dress again and pulled out the slim, matte black phone. It was an encrypted device, untraceable and completely separate from my personal life. I dialed a number I had memorized years ago. It rang once. Secure line, a crisp female voice answered. It was Jessica, my chief of operations. She was the only person in the world who knew the full extent of my wealth, and the only person I trusted to help me bury a body if it ever came to that. Tonight, we were burying a reputation. "Jessica." I said, my voice low and devoid of any warmth. "It is done. The wedding is over." There was a pause on the other end. Did he sign the prenuptial agreement amendment? "No," I said, looking at my own reflection. He did not. He decided to take a different route. He tried to drug me, Jessica. He slipped a sedative into my champagne during the toast. He intended to knock me out and use my unconscious state to forge a power of attorney. I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by the furious typing of a keyboard. Jessica did not offer pity. She offered action. "That is assault, Solange." Jessica said, her voice tightening. "That is attempted kidnapping and fraud. Do you want me to call the commissioner? We can have him in handcuffs before he wakes up." I considered it. It would be easy. I had the footage from my brooch camera. I had the witnesses. I could send Trevon to prison for 10 years, but prison was too easy for him. He would just play the victim, claiming he was framed by a bitter wife. He would become a martyr for his family. "No police," I said. "Not yet. I do not just want him arrested, Jessica. I want him ruined. I want him to lose the one thing he values more than his freedom. I want him to lose his status. I want his mother to watch her precious empire crumble to dust while everyone she looks down on laughs at her." I took a breath, letting the cold anger settle in my chest like a stone. "Initiate protocol Icarus." There was a moment of silence. Protocol Icarus was our nuclear option. It was designed for hostile corporate takeovers where we needed to destroy the opposing CEO's credibility, financial standing, and personal life simultaneously. We had only used it twice before. Both times the targets ended up bankrupt and exiled from their industries. Icarus confirmed, Jessica said, her tone shifting into pure business mode. "I am accessing his financials now. I am bypassing the standard firewalls. I am going into the dark web data dumps. What are we looking for specifically? Everything I commanded. Trevon does not have $5,000 to his name, but he is trying to secure a $2 million loan to save his logistics company. No bank will touch him with his credit score. That means he went somewhere else. I want to know who he owes. I checked my watch. I have to go back out there in 5 minutes. His mother and sister-in-law are circling like vultures. They are planning to ambush me with legal papers as soon as the doctors clear him. They think I'm a broke archivist who is terrified of them. I need ammunition, Jessica. Give me something I can use. Hold on, Jessica said. The typing speed increased. I am inside his company's private server. God, Solange, this is messy. He has been cooking the books for 3 years. He is categorizing personal vacations as business logistics. He bought Courtney a Porsche last year and listed it as a company delivery vehicle. I smirked at the mirror. Of course he did. Courtney drove a delivery truck. That would be a fun conversation starter. Dig deeper, I said. The debt. Find the debt. Got it, Jessica said. Her voice dropped. Oh, this is bad. This is really bad, Solange. Tell me. He did not go to a bank. He borrowed from the syndicate, specifically from Marcus the Butcher Thorne. He took a bridge loan of $500,000 6 months ago at 40% interest. He has missed 3 payments. My blood ran cold. The syndicate was not a group of loan sharks you messed with. They were the reason people went missing in the Atlanta underground. Trevon had not just risked his credit score. He had risked his life. And by trying to put my name on his assets, he was trying to drag me into the line of fire. He wanted to use my grandmother's house as collateral for a loan shark who broke kneecaps for a living. He is desperate, I whispered, realizing the gravity of it. That is why he drugged me. The syndicate probably gave him a deadline. Tonight. Exactly, Jessica confirmed. I am looking at a text message log on his cloud backup. Thorne sent him a message at 4 p.m. today. It says, "Get the signature or we take a finger." I let out a short, humorless laugh. So my husband tried to sacrifice me to save his own skin. He was willing to let me lose my home and potentially my safety just to pay off a gambling debt. Solange, Jessica said urgently, "You need to get out of there. These people are dangerous." If Trevon owes them that much money and he fails to pay tonight, they might come to the hospital. Let them come, I said, smoothing my hair. I am the safest person in this building. I own the security firm that guards St. Jude's Hospital. Do not forget that. But Trevon is on his own. I want you to buy the debt, I said suddenly. What Jessica asked. Contact Thorne's intermediary. Use the shell company. Use Valkyrie Holdings. Offer to buy Trevon's debt for 80 cents on the dollar. Thorne will take it. He wants cash, not a dead CEO. Buy the debt, Jessica. I want to be the one holding the leash. You want to become his loan shark? Jessica asked, incredulity mixing with admiration in her voice. I want to own him, I corrected. When he wakes up, I do not want him to owe a criminal. I want him to owe me, and I want to be the one to collect. Buy the debt. Then put a lien on his mother's house. Put a lien on Courtney's car. Secure everything. Consider it done, Jessica said. I will have the paperwork ready by morning. What about the power of attorney they are trying to force on you? I pulled a tube of lipstick from my bag. It was a deep blood red. I applied it carefully, watching my lips transform into a weapon. Let them try, I said. I signed a fake document earlier. Let them take it to the bank. When they realize it is worthless, I will already be the majority shareholder of his misery. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into the lining of my dress. I looked at myself one last time. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. The woman in the mirror was a predator who had just spotted her prey. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back out into the bright, harsh lights of the hospital corridor. The air was cold, but I didn't feel it. I walked toward the elevators, the heels of my shoes clicking a rhythm of war against the floor tiles. It was time to go sit by my husband's bedside and hold his hand. It was time to play the role of the loving wife one last time. Because tomorrow, when the sun came up and Protocol Icarus took full effect, Trevon Davis would wish he had never woken up at all. The VIP suite on the 4th floor was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. It was a steady, hypnotic sound that masked the chaos brewing beneath the surface. I sat in the oversized leather armchair in the corner, watching Trevon sleep. Or rather, I watched him pretend to sleep. I knew he was awake. I could see the rapid movement of his eyes beneath his eyelids. I could see the tension in his jaw. He was strategizing. He was trying to figure out how to spin this. He had tried to knock me out, and instead, he had knocked himself out. He had to be terrified. He had to be wondering if I knew. I crossed my legs and smoothed the silk of my wedding dress. I had refused to change. I wanted him to wake up and see me in the dress. I wanted him to see exactly what he had tried to destroy. Trevon let out a low, theatrical groan. He shifted in the bed, the crisp hospital sheets rustling. He fluttered his eyes open, blinking rapidly, as if the dim light of the room was blinding him. He looked around confused, acting the part of the disoriented victim perfectly. "Solange," he croaked, his voice raspy. Where am I? What happened?" I stood up and walked to the side of the bed. I kept my face neutral, a mask of concern. "You are at St. Jude's, Trevon," I said, pouring him a glass of water from the pitcher on the bedside table. "You collapsed at the reception, right after the toast." He took the water, his hands shaking slightly. I watched him drink. I wondered if he tasted the irony. "Collapsed," he repeated, furrowing his brow. "I do not remember. I remember standing up. I remember looking at you. And then, nothing. Did I ruin it? Did I ruin the wedding? You did not ruin anything, baby." I lied. My voice was soft, soothing. It was the voice of a dutiful wife. It was the voice of a woman who didn't know her husband was a monster. Just then the door opened and Dr. Evans walked in. I knew Dr. Evans. He was on the board of Trevon's logistics company. He was also the man who signed off on Trevon's bogus insurance claims whenever he needed a vacation. He was not here to practice medicine. He was here to practice damage control. "Ah, the patient is awake," Dr. Evans said, smiling too brightly. He walked over to the monitors, checking the readouts with a performative frown. "You gave us quite a scare there, Trevon. Your mother was beside herself. What is wrong with me?" Dr. Trevon asked, sitting up slightly. "Why did I black out?" Dr. Evans sighed, clicking his pen. "It is exactly what I feared, Trevon. It is extreme exhaustion coupled with a stress-induced vagal response. Your cortisol levels are through the roof. I have been telling you for months that you cannot keep burning the candle at both ends. The merger, the expansion, the wedding planning, it was too much. Your body simply decided to shut down to protect itself." I listened to this diagnosis with a straight face. Stress. He was calling a hypnotic sedative overdose stress. It was brilliant, really. It garnered sympathy. It made Trevon look like a hard-working hero who sacrificed his health for his empire. And most importantly, it swept any toxicology questions under the rug. "Is that all?" Trevon asked, looking relieved. "Just stress. Just stress," Dr. Evans confirmed. "But serious stress. You need rest. You need to eliminate worry. And frankly, you need to resolve whatever financial pressure is triggering this hypertension. I am going to prescribe you some mild anti-anxiety medication, but the real cure is lifestyle management." He turned to me, giving me a patronizing smile. "Take care of him, Solange. He carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. He needs a partner who understands that." "I understand perfectly, doctor," I said. "I will make sure he gets exactly what he deserves." Dr. Evans missed the double meaning. He patted Trevon on the shoulder and slipped out of the room, leaving us alone again. The air in the room shifted immediately. The performance was over. Now it was time for business. Trevon reached out and grabbed my hand. His palm was clammy. His grip was desperate. He looked at me with those soulful brown eyes that had charmed me 2 years ago. "I am so sorry, Solange," he said. "Dr. Evans is right. I have been drowning. I did not want to worry you. I wanted everything to be perfect for us." "You should have told me," I said, pulling my hand away gently under the guise of fixing his blanket. I did not want him touching me. I felt dirty just being in his orbit. "I know," Trevon said. "I was trying to fix it alone, but I can't, not anymore. This collapse, it is a wake-up call. I need your help, baby. I really need your help." I looked at him. This was it, the pivot. What do you need, Trevon? He took a deep breath. The company is in a temporary jam. It is just a cash flow issue. We have millions coming in next quarter from the government contracts, but right now my liquidity is tied up. The bank. They are threatening to freeze the payroll accounts tomorrow morning. If I do not show proof of collateral by 9 a.m., my employees do not get paid. He paused, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to panic about the poor employees. When I stayed silent, he continued, I need a guarantor, Solange, just for a bridge loan, a short-term infusion of cash to keep the lights on until the government check clears. I stared at him. I knew exactly what he was asking. He did not know I was a millionaire. He thought I was a struggling freelancer. In his mind, I only had one thing of value. What kind of collateral, Trevon? I asked, playing dumb. My car is a Honda. My savings account has $2,000 in it. What do I have that a bank would want? He looked down at the sheets, picking at a loose thread. The apartment, Solange. Your grandmother's apartment in Buckhead. The room went dead silent. He had said it. He had actually said it. My grandmother's apartment was a pre-war 2-bedroom unit in one of the most historic buildings in Atlanta. It was paid off. It was the only home I had known since my parents died. When my grandmother passed, she left it to me explicitly, stating in her will that it was to be my sanctuary. It was worth maybe $400,000 on paper, but to me, it was priceless. And Trevon knew that. He knew how much I loved that place. You want me to mortgage my home? I asked, my voice flat. No, not mortgage, he said quickly, looking up. Just a lien, a guarantee. We use the deed as security for the loan. We do not actually sell it. It is just a piece of paper, Solange. It sits in a file at the bank for 30 days. Once the government contract money hits the account, I pay off the loan and the deed comes right back to you. No risk. Zero risk. He reached for my hand again. This time I let him take it. I needed to feel the deceit in his skin. Baby, please, he pleaded. If I do not do this, I lose the company. If I lose the company, we lose everything. Our future, the house we want to buy, the kids we want to have. I am doing this for us. I am asking you to trust me. Do you trust me? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had looked me in the eye 3 hours ago and toasted to our love while watching me drink poison. He was willing to gamble my roof, my sanctuary, my inheritance on a lie. He wasn't using this money for payroll. He was using it to pay off Marcus Thorne. He was using my grandmother's legacy to save his kneecaps. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive how low he was willing to sink. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was so in love, so desperate to be a CEO's wife, that I would hand over the keys to my life without reading the fine print. I do trust you, Trevon. I lied. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I do not have the deed here. It is in the safe at the apartment. Trevon's eyes lit up. A flash of triumph crossed his face before he masked it with relief. That is okay, he said. That is totally okay. Courtney and Julian can go get it. Or, better yet, we do not need the physical deed tonight. I just need you to sign the power of attorney. Dr. Evans witnessed my capacity to sign, and since we are married now, if you sign it giving me authority, I can handle the bank digital filing in the morning. You won't even have to go down there. I will handle the stress. You just sign. So that was the plan. The power of attorney. The document that would give him total control over every asset I owned. If I signed that he wouldn't just take the apartment against a loan, he could sell it outright. He could open credit cards in my name. He could drain my secret accounts if he ever found them. He wanted to own me. I pulled my hand back slowly. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. I need to think, Trevon, I said. That apartment is all I have. Solange, please, he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. We do not have time to think. The bank opens in 8 hours. If I do not have that signature by morning, it is over. Do you want to see me fail? Do you want to see your husband humiliated? He was guilt-tripping me. He was weaponizing his own failure. I turned back to him. I will not sign a power of attorney, Trevon. That is too much. His face fell. Anger flashed in his eyes, quickly replaced by panic. Then what? He snapped. What will you do? I will sign a limited guarantor agreement, I said, improvising. I will sign a document that allows you to use the property as collateral for this specific loan only, nothing else. And I want to see the loan terms. He hesitated. He didn't want me to see the loan terms because the loan wasn't from a bank. It was from a shell company controlled by the syndicate. Or so he thought. He didn't know I had already bought the debt. Fine, he said, exhaling sharply. Fine. A limited agreement, whatever makes you feel comfortable. Courtney has the papers. She is downstairs. She can bring them up. He reached for the call button on the side of the bed. Call her, I said. Call her up. I watched him press the button. He looked relieved. He thought he had won. He thought he had manipulated the naive little librarian into saving his skin. He had no idea that he had just invited the wolf into the hen house. You are amazing, Solange, he said, leaning back against the pillows. You really are. I am going to make this up to you. I promise. Once this deal goes through, I am going to buy you a new car. Maybe a Mercedes. You deserve it. I smiled. A small, tight smile. I do not want a Mercedes, Trevon, I said softly. What do you want? He asked, closing his eyes, confident in his victory. I want the truth, I thought. But I said nothing. I sat back down in the chair and waited for the vultures to arrive. The game was escalating. He was desperate enough to leverage my home, which meant I had to be ruthless enough to take his. The door handle turned. It wasn't a nurse. It was Courtney. She didn't even knock. She walked in holding a manila folder like it was a weapon. She looked at Trevon, then she looked at me. She didn't ask how he was. She didn't ask if he was in pain. Did she agree? Courtney asked, ignoring me completely. She agreed, Trevon said, opening his eyes. Give her the papers, Courtney smirked. It was a cold, ugly expression that distorted her pretty features. She walked over to me and dropped the folder on my lap. Sign at the bottom, she said, and press hard. It is a carbon copy. I looked at the folder. I looked at her. And I realized something. They didn't just want the money, they enjoyed this. They enjoyed taking from me. It made them feel powerful. It made them feel superior. I opened the folder. The text was dense legal jargon. I scanned it quickly. It wasn't a limited guarantor agreement. It was a full transfer of deed. They were trying to trick me right in front of my face. I reached into my purse for a pen. I hope you have a pen, Courtney said snidely, or do you need to borrow one of mine? I have my own, thank you, I said. I uncapped the pen. I felt Trevon's eyes on me. I felt Courtney's eyes on me. They were holding their breath. I lowered the pen to the paper, but I didn't sign my name. Not really. I signed a variation, a loop here, a missing dot there, a signature that would look perfect to them but would fail any forensic handwriting analysis in a court of law. I finished signing and closed the folder. There, I said, handing it back to Courtney. She snatched it from my hand, checking the signature quickly. She looked satisfied. See, she said to Trevon. That wasn't so hard, was it? She turned to leave. Get some rest, Trevon, she said. I will handle the bank. She didn't even say goodbye to me. She walked out the door, her heels clicking victoriously. Trevon let out a long sigh. Thank you, baby, he whispered. You just saved my life. You have no idea, I thought. I stood up. I'm going to get some coffee, I said. I will be back. Take your time, Trevon mumbled, already drifting back into a drug-induced sleep. I walked out of the room. I walked down the hall past the nurse's station. I didn't go to the cafeteria. I went to the elevator. I needed to make a call. I needed to tell Jessica that the trap was set. They had the bait. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. I looked at the document lying on the hospital bed tray table. The black letters seemed to swim under the harsh fluorescent lights. Trevon was watching me, his eyes hooded and heavy with the sedative but still sharp with greed. He was waiting for the ink to hit the paper. He was waiting for me to sign away my grandfather's legacy to save his own skin. I gripped the pen tighter, my knuckles turning white. It wasn't fear. It was disgust. I looked at Trevon, and for a fleeting second, I allowed the mask to slip. I allowed him to see the hesitation. I cannot do this. Trevon, I said, my voice trembling slightly. This is my grandmother's home. It is not just an asset. It is my history. If the bank takes it, I have nowhere to go. Trevon's face hardened. The loving husband act evaporated instantly, replaced by the petulant child I had come to know too well. Solange, we discussed this. He snapped, his voice rising. You promised. You said you trusted me. Are you really going to let my company crash and burn over a dusty old apartment? I pushed the papers away. I need more time, I said, standing up. I need to have a lawyer look at this. I cannot just sign a power of attorney without legal counsel. It is reckless. Trevon tried to sit up, reaching for me, but the wires of the heart monitor tugged him back. Solange, do not walk out of here. If you walk out that door, do not bother coming back. I turned my back on him, heading for the door. I had my hand on the handle, ready to leave, ready to drag this out longer, when the door exploded inward. It slammed against the wall with a deafening crack. Courtney stood in the doorway, breathing hard, her face flushed with a mixture of exertion and triumph. She looked like a hunter who had just cornered a fox. She wasn't holding legal papers this time. She was holding a thick manila envelope. Going somewhere. Solange, she sneered, blocking my path. I stepped back, my survival instincts kicking in. Courtney, move out of my way. She laughed a harsh, brittle sound. I do not think so. You are not going anywhere until you sign that paper. She walked into the room, kicking the door shut behind her with her heel. She marched straight up to the bed, bypassing me, and dumped the contents of the envelope onto the sheets right over Trevon's legs. Photographs. Dozens of them. They spilled out in a glossy cascade. Trevon looked down, confused. Courtney, what is this? Look at your innocent little wife, Trevon. Courtney said, pointing a manicured finger at me. Look at what she does when you are working late at the office. Look at who she really is. I looked at the photos. My heart did not skip a beat because I knew exactly what they were. I knew exactly when they were taken. But to them, they looked damning. There was a photo of me sitting at a corner table at Le Bernardin in New York City. I was laughing, my head thrown back. Across from me was a tall, handsome man in a bespoke gray suit. He was leaning in, touching my arm. There was another photo of me getting into a black SUV with the same man outside a hotel in Chicago. And a third photo, grainy and zoomed in, showing us hugging goodbye outside an office building in downtown Atlanta. Trevon picked up one of the photos, his hands shaking. Who is this? He whispered. Solange, who is this man? Courtney answered for me. That is her lover, Trevon. That is the man she has been funneling your money to. That is the man she was planning to run away with after she killed you. I stared at Courtney. The audacity was breathtaking. She had hired a private investigator. She had been tracking me for months, and in her desperation to find dirt, she had completely misinterpreted the evidence. The man in the photos was not my lover. He was Julian Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Tech. He was one of my biggest clients. The lunch in New York was a celebration after I saved his company $10 million in a forensic audit. The hug in Atlanta was him thanking me for exposing an embezzler on his board of directors. But of course, Courtney saw a black woman in a nice suit with a rich man, and her mind went straight to the gutter. She could not conceive of a world where I was the peer of a man like Julian Sterling. I crossed my arms. You are spying on me now, Courtney. Is that how low you have stooped? I am protecting my family, Courtney spat. We knew you were trash, Solange. We just needed proof, and now we have it. Adultery, infidelity. She turned to Trevon, who was looking at the photos with a look of pure betrayal. The irony was palpable. The man who had a second phone for his mistresses was now playing the victim. She is cheating on you, Trevon, Courtney said, her voice dripping with poison. Look at her. She does not love you. She never did. She is a gold digger who got caught. That is why she poisoned you. She wanted you out of the way so she could go be with him. Trevon looked up at me, his eyes wet with tears. Is it true, Solange? Is this why you won't sign the papers? Are you saving the apartment for him? I looked at him. I could have explained. I could have told him the truth right then and there. I could have told him that Julian Sterling was gay and happily married to his husband of 10 years. I could have told him that the black SUV was a company car paid for by my firm. But I didn't. I needed them to think they had leverage. I needed them to think they had me cornered. I stayed silent, letting the accusation hang in the air. Courtney took my silence as a confession. She turned on me, her eyes gleaming with malice. Here is what is going to happen, Solange, she said, stepping into my personal space. You are going to pick up that pen. You are going to sign the power of attorney. You are going to sign the deed transfer. And you are going to do it right now. Or what I asked, keeping my voice steady. Or I call the police, Courtney said, and then I call the press. My father knows every editor in this city. By tomorrow morning, your face will be on the front page of every newspaper. The Black Widow, the adulterous wife who poisoned her husband on their wedding night to run off with her lover. She leaned in closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. Think about it, Solange. Who will they believe? The daughter of Senator Miller? Or you? A nobody from the South Side with a dead-end job and a history of infidelity. You will go to prison, and while you are rotting in a cell, we will take the apartment anyway through civil court. It was a classic shakedown. It was extortion, plain and simple. She was using her privilege, her father's name, and a fabricated narrative to strip me of my rights. And the worst part was, she believed it. She truly believed she was the hero of this story. She believed she was saving her brother from a predator. She didn't realize she was the predator. Trevon dropped the photos on the bed. Just sign it, Solange. He said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. Sign the papers and get out. I do not want to look at you. He turned his face away toward the wall. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the room settle on my shoulders. This was the Layer 2 conflict I had been waiting for, the financial strip mining. They weren't just asking for help anymore. They were taking it by force. I looked at Courtney. Her chin was raised, her eyes daring me to defy her. You are despicable, I whispered. Courtney shrugged. I am effective. Now sign, or I dial the reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I have him on speed dial. I walked over to the table. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. If I sign this, I said, looking at Courtney, you destroy the photos, and you never speak of this again. Courtney smirked. I make no promises to trash, but if you sign, you walk out of here a free woman. For now. I looked at the paper. It was a general power of attorney. It gave Trevon the right to sell, buy, and manage any property in my name. It was a death warrant for my financial independence. If I was truly the poor archivist they thought I was, this would be the end of my life. I would be homeless, bankrupt, and alone. But I wasn't Solange the archivist. I was Solange the CEO, and I knew something they didn't. A power of attorney signed under duress is invalid. A power of attorney signed based on blackmail is a felony for the coercer. And most importantly, I had been recording this entire conversation. My brooch. The ugly vintage gold flower pinned to my dress that Courtney had made fun of earlier. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a high-definition recording device. I had every word. I had the threat. I had the extortion. I lowered the pen to the paper. I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't signing my defeat. I was signing their indictment. Fine, I said. You win. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name. But once again, I added the microscopic variation. The loop on the S was too wide. The G was missing its tail. It was a subtle signal to my lawyers. I finished signing and threw the pen down on the table. Are you happy now? I asked. Courtney snatched the papers up, blowing on the ink to dry it. She checked the signature, comparing it to the marriage license on the table. It looked identical to the naked eye. Very happy, she said. She shoved the papers into her bag. Now get out. I looked at Trevon one last time. He didn't turn around. He lay there, clutching the photos of me and Julian nursing his bruised ego while his sister stole his wife's future. I walked to the door. You will regret this, Courtney, I said quietly. She laughed. The only thing I regret is that Trevon met you. Goodbye, Solange. I walked out into the hallway. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was racing. They had the papers. They thought they had the apartment. They would go to the bank in the morning. I checked my watch. It was 3 a.m. The banks opened in 6 hours. I pulled out my burner phone and typed a message to Jessica. They took the bait. They used blackmail. I have it on tape. Proceed to phase 3. I walked toward the exit of the hospital. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. I felt clean. The pretense was over. They had shown me exactly who they were. They were willing to destroy me to save themselves. Now I didn't have to hold back. I walked to the parking lot where my old Honda was parked next to Courtney's gleaming white Range Rover. I stopped for a second looking at her car. I reached into my purse and pulled out a tube of lipstick. On the driver's side window of her Range Rover, I wrote 2 words in blood-red letters. Wrong glass. It was petty, it was childish, but it felt good. I got into my car and drove away. I wasn't going to my apartment. I couldn't go there. Courtney and Julian would be there within the hour to change the locks. I drove toward the skyline, toward the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons that was permanently reserved under the name of Archangel Data. I needed a shower, I needed a glass of wine, and I needed to prepare for the board meeting. Because tomorrow morning, I wasn't just going to be Solange the rejected wife. I was going to be the majority shareholder of the logistics company Trevon was trying to save. The war had started, and they had just fired the first shot at a nuclear submarine. I stood there paralyzed by the threat hanging in the air like toxic smoke. The photographs of me and Julian were scattered across the hospital bedsheets, a mosaic of lies that Courtney had weaponized against me. I looked at Trevon. He was still avoiding my gaze, staring at the wall, playing the part of the wounded husband whose heart had been broken by his cheating wife. But I saw the way his hand twitched. He was waiting. He was desperate. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor that Trevon did not even need. Courtney took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. Her perfume was expensive, but cloying a heavy floral scent that made me want to gag. She held the pen out to me like it was a lifeline she was graciously offering to a drowning woman. "Make the right choice," Solange, Courtney said. Her voice dropped dead cold. "Save your reputation, save your dignity. Or I walk out of this room and upload these photos to every gossip blog in Atlanta. I will ruin you. You will never work in this town again." I let my shoulders slump. I let my lower lip tremble. I forced tears to well up in my eyes. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I needed them to believe I was broken. I needed them to believe that their blackmail had worked. "Please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Please do not do that, Courtney. I have worked so hard for my career. Even though those photos are innocent, nobody will believe me. You know how people are. You know how they treat women like me." Courtney smirked. It was a satisfied, ugly expression. She thought she had broken the wild horse. She thought she had put me in my place. "Exactly," she said. "Nobody cares about the truth, Solange. They care about the scandal, and a black woman cheating on her sick husband on her wedding night. That is a story that sells itself. So do not test me. Sign the papers." I reached out and took the pen. My hand was shaking visibly. Trevon finally turned his head to look at me. His eyes were wide with anticipation. He looked like a child waiting to open a present. He did not look like a dying man. He looked like a greedy one. I walked over to the rolling tray table where the documents lay open. The general power of attorney, the deed transfer, the documents that would strip me of my ownership of my grandmother's apartment and hand full control over to Trevon. I looked down at the paper. The black letters seemed to mock me. I felt a surge of nausea. Not from fear, but from the sheer violation of it all. They were forcing me to sign away my legacy to cover up their incompetence. I gripped the pen tighter. I took a deep, shaky breath. "You promise you will burn the photos?" I asked, looking at Courtney with wide, fearful eyes. "You promise you won't tell anyone?" Courtney rolled her eyes, impatient. Yes, I promise. Just sign the damn thing, Solange. We are running out of time." "The bank opens in a few hours." I bent over the paper. I felt the tip of the pen touch the page. In my mind, I was calculating. I knew the laws of Georgia better than they did. I knew that a signature obtained under duress was void. I knew that blackmail was a felony. But proving duress in court could be messy. It could take months. I needed a fail-safe. I needed a kill switch embedded right there on the page. My legal signature, the one on file with my bank and the one notarized on my passport, was very specific. It was Solange A. Davis. The A stood for Aaliyah, my middle name. I always included the middle initial. Always. It was a non-negotiable part of my identity and my legal branding. But tonight, I was not Solange A. Davis. Tonight, I was a victim. I pressed the pen down. I wrote slowly, pretending to be hesitant, pretending to be fighting back tears. Solange Davis. I omitted the A. I also changed the slant. My natural handwriting slanted to the right, optimistic and forward-thinking. I forced this signature to stand straight up, almost leaning backward. To an untrained eye, it looked exactly like my handwriting. But to a forensic document examiner or a bank verification algorithm, it would flag as a mismatch. It would flag as a forgery or a mistake. And if they tried to enforce it, I could stand in court and say under oath, that is not my legal signature, and I would be telling the truth. I finished the signature with a flourish, lifting the pen. I stared at it for a second. It looked real enough to fool greedy people. I stepped back, dropping the pen onto the tray. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. There I said, my voice barely a whisper, "It is done. Are you happy now?" Courtney practically lunged for the papers. She snatched them up, her eyes scanning the bottom of the page, hungry for the ink. She saw the name Solange Davis. She saw the loops and the curves. She did not notice the missing initial. She did not notice the lack of slant. She was too blinded by her own victory. She let out a laugh, a sound of pure relief and triumph. "See," she said, holding the paper up to Trevon like a trophy. "I told you she would do the right thing." Trevon let out a long exhale, his entire body relaxing into the mattress. "Thank God," he said. "Thank you, Solange. You did the right thing. You really did." Courtney shoved the papers into her oversized designer bag, zipping it shut with a definitive snap. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You can go now," she said, dismissing me like a servant. "We have some family business to discuss. And Solange, do not think about calling the bank to cancel this. If you do, the photos go public. I am keeping copies, just in case you get brave." I nodded, looking at the floor. "I won't," I said softly. "I just want to go home," Good Courtney said. "Go home. Cry it out. You will feel better in the morning knowing you helped your husband." Then the miracle happened. The moment the papers were safely in Courtney's bag, Trevon sat up. He didn't struggle. He didn't groan. He sat up, fully swinging his legs over the side of the bed. The heart monitor didn't even spike. "Courtney!" he said, his voice strong and clear, completely devoid of the raspy weakness he had faked for the last hour. "Call the locksmith. Tell him to meet us at the apartment in an hour. I want the locks changed before she tries anything. And call Julian. Tell him to get the loan officer on the phone. We need to move this money as soon as the doors open." I watched him. I watched the man who was supposedly dying of stress-induced heart failure suddenly moving with the energy of a man who just won the lottery. "Trevon," I said, feigning confusion. "You are okay. You can walk." He looked at me, and for the first time that night he didn't bother with the mask. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "I am fine, Solange," he said, standing up and stretching his arms. "I just needed a little rest. And I needed you to stop being selfish. Now, if you will excuse us, we have work to do." He walked over to the mirror, checking his hair. He looked at his reflection, adjusting his hospital gown as if it were a suit. "Babe, can you get me some food?" he asked Courtney, ignoring me completely. "I am starving. I haven't eaten since the reception." "I will get you a burger," Courtney said, smiling at him affectionately. "You earned it." They were celebrating. They were planning their victory lap. They thought they had just pulled off the heist of the century. They thought they had stripped me of my home, my dignity, and my future. I backed toward the door, clutching my purse to my chest. "I am leaving," I whispered. "Goodbye, Solange." Trevon said without looking back, "Close the door on your way out." I slipped out of the room, closing the heavy door behind me. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. I could hear them laughing inside. I could hear Courtney making a phone call, probably to the locksmith. I lowered my hands from my chest. I straightened my spine. The tears evaporated instantly. The tremble in my lip vanished. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the floor. I walked past the nurse's station, where a young nurse looked up and gave me a sympathetic smile. "I hope he feels better," she said kindly. I stopped and looked at her. I smiled back, a real smile, a sharp, dangerous smile. "Oh, he feels great," I said. "He thinks he just won the jackpot." I walked to the elevator and pressed the down button. They had the paper, they had the signature, they had the arrogance, but they had the wrong signature. And they had no idea that while they were celebrating inside that hospital room, I was about to go to war. I pulled out my phone as the elevator doors closed, shielding me from the 4th floor. I dialed Jessica. "They have the document," I said, my voice cool and composed. "It is signed with the duress variant. It is useless. But they do not know that yet. Let them go to the bank. Let them try to process it." "Copy that," Jessica said. "What is the next move?" "They are sending a locksmith to my apartment," I said, checking my watch. "They want to lock me out." "Let them," Jessica said. "We already moved the critical files. The apartment is empty except for the furniture." "Good," I said. "Let them break in. Let them change the locks. It will just add another charge to the police report later. Breaking and entering. Illegal eviction. The list is getting longer." I walked out into the cool night air of the parking lot. I looked back up at the 4th floor window. The light was on. I could imagine them up there, high-fiving, eating burgers, thinking they were the smartest people in the room. "Enjoy the burger, Trevon," I whispered. "It is the last expensive meal you are going to eat for a very long time." I got into my car and started the engine. I felt a strange sense of peace. The worst had happened. The betrayal was complete. There was no more guessing, no more hoping he was a good man deep down. He had shown me his soul, and it was rotten. Now I was free. Free to destroy him without a shred of guilt. I pulled out of the parking lot, merging onto the highway. The city lights of Atlanta blurred past me. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to the Archangel Data headquarters. I had a board meeting to prepare for, and I had a husband to bankrupt. It had been exactly 7 days since I walked out of St. Jude's Hospital. 7 days since I signed the fake power of attorney document. 7 days since my husband and his family declared victory over my life. Tonight, my apartment did not feel like my home. It felt like a nightclub. The bass from the oversized speakers Trevon had rented was vibrating the vintage oak floorboards that my grandmother had polished by hand for 40 years. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and cheap ambition. Trevon was hosting a party. He called it a networking gala, but everyone knew what it really was. It was a victory lap. He had invited every B-list celebrity wannabe influencer and mid-level executive in Atlanta to come and marvel at his success. He was strutting around the living room, holding a glass of scotch, acting like the king of Buckhead. And the worst part was that I was there. I was wearing a simple black dress, standing in the corner near the kitchen door, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres like a servant. Trevon had insisted I attend. He said it was important for appearances. He said that people needed to see that we were a happy, united couple, especially after the little health scare at the wedding. But the real reason he wanted me there was power. He wanted to show everyone that he had tamed me. He wanted to parade me around as the trophy wife who knew her place. Courtney was standing by the fireplace wearing a dress that was too short and too loud, telling a group of women about how she had personally decorated the apartment. "I just felt like it needed a modern touch," she said, waving her hand at my grandmother's antique velvet curtains. "You know how old people are. They hold on to junk. We are going to rip all this out next month and put in floor-to-ceiling mirrors." I gripped the tray tighter. I wanted to walk over there and dump the tray of crab cakes on her head, but I didn't. I waited. My phone vibrated against my hip. It was the signal I had been waiting for all week. I set the tray down on a side table and slipped into the hallway. I walked into the guest bathroom and locked the door. The music was muffled here, but the thumping bass still rattled the mirror. I pulled out my phone. It was an email from the toxicology lab at Archangel Data. The subject line was simply, "Urgent analysis complete." I opened the file. When I read the first paragraph, my blood turned to ice. I had assumed Trevon tried to drug me with a sedative. I assumed he used something like Valium or Xanax, something to knock me out so he could forge my signature while I slept. I thought he was a thief. But I was wrong. He wasn't just a thief. He was a monster. The chemical compound found in the champagne was not a standard sedative. It was a synthetic derivative of scopolamine, often referred to on the streets as devil's breath. I read the report detailing the effects. Unlike Rohypnol, which simply knocks you out, scopolamine puts the victim in a state of obedient zombie-like trance. The victim remains awake. They can walk. They can talk. They can hold a pen. But they have absolutely no free will. They become highly suggestible. If you tell them to empty their bank account, they will do it with a smile. If you tell them to sign a confession for a crime they didn't commit, they will write it out in their own handwriting. And the terrifying part is that afterward they have zero memory of the event. I leaned back against the cold tile wall, feeling the room spin. Trevon didn't just want to forge my signature. He wanted me to sign the papers myself. He wanted witnesses to see me awake and smiling, signing away my life. He wanted to strip me of my agency completely. I scrolled down to the second part of the report. My team had cross-referenced the chemical signature. This particular batch of synthetic scopolamine was extremely rare. It was expensive, and it was traceable. It had been purchased on the dark web using Bitcoin, and the wallet address used to purchase it was linked to an IP address. I knew that IP address. It belonged to the logistics company. It came from Trevon's personal office computer. He had planned this for weeks. He had sat in his office, probably looking at photos of our engagement, while ordering a chemical weapon to use against me. I swiped to the next attachment in the email. It was a financial breakdown from Jessica. Now I understood why he needed such a powerful drug. The debt he was in wasn't $2 million. It wasn't just a cash flow problem. Trevon had leveraged himself into a $5 million hole. He had been running a Ponzi scheme within his own logistics company. He had been taking money from new investors to pay off returns to old investors. He had falsified shipping manifests to claim revenue for cargo that didn't exist. He had borrowed from banks, from friends, and finally from the syndicate. And the walls were closing in. The $5 million was due next week. If he didn't pay, he wasn't just going to lose the company. He was going to federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. His plan was never to pay off the loan using my apartment as collateral. That was a lie. His plan was to use the scopolamine to make me sign a debt transfer agreement. He was going to transfer the entire $5 million liability onto me. He was going to put the fraudulent accounts in my name. He was going to make me the fall guy. If I had drunk that champagne, I would have woken up the next morning, not just homeless, but facing 20 years in prison for his crimes. He would have played the grieving husband, claiming he had no idea his wife was a criminal mastermind. He would have walked away clean, leaving me to rot in a cell. The sheer cruelty of it took my breath away. He wasn't just greedy. He was willing to sacrifice my entire existence to save his reputation. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked different than I did a week ago. The softness was gone. The hesitation was gone. The woman staring back at me was cold. She was calculating. She was deadly. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked back out into the party. The noise seemed louder now. The laughter seemed more grotesque. I saw Trevon across the room. He was laughing at something a young woman in a red dress said. He looked so confident. He looked so safe. He had no idea that I had just bought his death warrant. He had no idea that Archangel Data had just completed the purchase of his syndicate debt. I was now the owner of the $5 million note. And he had no idea that I knew about the poison. I walked over to the bar. I picked up a bottle of expensive champagne, the same brand he had tried to kill me with. I poured a glass. I walked through the crowd, parting the sea of fake friends. I walked straight up to Trevon. He saw me coming, and his smile faltered for a second before he recovered. Here she is, he announced, throwing an arm around my shoulder. My beautiful wife, the woman who stands by her man. The crowd cheered politely. Courtney clapped her hands slowly from the corner, watching me like a hawk. I looked up at Trevon. I didn't smile. I want to make a toast, I said clearly. My voice cut through the music. Trevon looked surprised, but he nodded, gesturing to the DJ to lower the volume. Go ahead, babe, he said. Tell them how happy we are. I raised the glass. I looked around the room at the people drinking my wine, standing on my floors, breathing my air. To clarity, I said. The room went quiet. It was an odd toast. To seeing people for who they really are, I continued, keeping my eyes locked on Trevon. And to debts. Because all debts must be paid eventually. Even the ones you try to hide. Trevon stiffened. His arm dropped from my shoulder. He looked at me with a flash of panic. He didn't understand how much I knew, but he knew something was wrong. Solange, he warned, his voice low. Not now. I smiled. It was the smile of a shark circling a swimmer. Don't worry, darling, I said. I am just happy. I am so happy that I didn't drink the champagne at the wedding." "Aren't you?" His face went pale. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking gray and sickly. He knew. He knew that I knew. I took a sip of the champagne. It was crisp and cold. "Cheers," I whispered. I turned and walked away. I didn't stay for the rest of the party. I walked straight to the front door. Courtney tried to stop me. "Where do you think you are going?" she hissed, blocking my path. "We are not done here. You need to clean up the kitchen." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who thought she was a queen because her father was a politician. "Get out of my way, Courtney," I said calmly. "Excuse me," she gasped. "Do not talk to me like that. Remember who holds the power here. We have the power of Attorney Solange. We own you." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "You own nothing," I said. "You are standing in a house that is about to collapse, and you are too stupid to see the cracks." I pushed past her. I opened the front door and walked out into the hallway. I pulled out my phone and dialed Jessica. "Execute the foreclosure," I said, "and send the file on the poison to the district attorney, but tell them to hold off on the arrest warrant. I want to deliver it myself." I walked down the stairs, leaving the party behind. Trevon thought he was celebrating his victory. He thought he had escaped the consequences of his actions. But the truth was, the poison was already in his system. It wasn't scopolamine, it was his own greed. And in about 12 hours, it was going to kill him. I walked into the lobby of my apartment building at 6 in the evening on a Tuesday. My heels clicked against the marble floor, but the rhythm was heavy. I was tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long day of work, but the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from living in a war zone. I had spent the last week watching my husband and his family dismantle my life piece by piece. They had forged documents, they had invaded my privacy, they had tried to poison me, and now as I pressed the button for the 12th floor, I had a sinking feeling that the day was not over yet. The elevator ride felt impossibly long. I watched the numbers climb, counting them down like seconds on a bomb timer. When the doors slid open, the first thing I heard was not the silence of my sanctuary. It was a sound that made my teeth ache. It was the high-pitched whine of an industrial drill grinding against metal. It was coming from my apartment. I stepped out of the elevator and walked down the hallway. My front door was ajar. The lock had been picked. The wood around the frame was splintered. They had not just entered, they had breached. I pushed the door open and the smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of friction, hot metal, sawdust, and the cloying scent of that expensive floral perfume that Courtney wore like a weapon. I walked through the foyer. My living room was a mess. Cushions were thrown on the floor, drawers were pulled open. But the noise was coming from the back room, my home office. This room was my sacred space. It was where I had built Archangel data from a laptop and a dream into a multi-million-dollar empire. It was where I kept the files that could bring down half the corporate giants in Atlanta. And it was strictly off-limits. Even Trevon knew never to go in there. I stood in the doorway, and the scene before me made my blood boil. A man in blue coveralls was kneeling on the floor in front of my heavy steel wall safe. He was sweating profusely, holding a heavy-duty drill against the locking mechanism. Sparks were flying, hitting the expensive Persian rug my grandmother had left me. Standing over him, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently, was Courtney. She was wearing a white tennis outfit, as if she had just come from the country club. She looked out of place and grotesque in my dimly lit office, screaming orders at the man over the roar of the drill. "Faster," she yelled. "We do not have all day. Just blow the hinges if you have to." "Courtney," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. The locksmith jumped. The drill slipped, screeching against the steel door. He turned around, looking terrified. He saw a woman standing there in a tailored black suit, looking like the angel of death. Courtney spun around. She did not look terrified. She looked annoyed. She looked like I was the intruder. "Oh," she said, rolling her eyes, "you are home. Trevon said you would be working late at the library or whatever it is you do." I walked into the room. I stepped over a pile of papers they had swept off my desk. I looked at the locksmith. "Get out," I said. The man looked at me, then he looked at Courtney. "Stay right there," Courtney snapped at him. "You finished the job. I am paying you double, remember." She turned back to me, putting a hand on her hip. Do not be dramatic, Solange. We are just retrieving some assets. Assets, I repeated. You are breaking into my safe, Courtney. You broke into my home. This is burglary. This is a felony. Courtney laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. It is not burglary when it is family property, she said. And since you signed that power of attorney, everything in this apartment belongs to Trevon, which means it belongs to the family. We are just conducting an inventory. She walked over to my desk, picking up a crystal paperweight and examining it with disdain before dropping it back down. Trevon told us the truth, Solange. He told us about your little stash. He said you do not trust banks. He said you keep cash in here. Tips from your little side jobs. Savings you have been hiding from him. I stared at her. The racism was so casual, so effortless. Because I was a black woman from a certain neighborhood, because I didn't flash money, they assumed I was financially illiterate. They assumed I stuffed cash under mattresses and into safes like a drug dealer. They couldn't conceive that my money was in diversified offshore accounts in blind trusts and in high-yield bonds. You think I keep cash in a wall safe, I asked, keeping my face neutral. We know you do, Courtney said. Trevon said you are paranoid. He said you have been hoarding money for years while he struggled to keep the lights on at his company. That is selfish, Solange. It is incredibly selfish to let your husband suffer when you are sitting on a pile of cash. She took a step toward me, her face twisting into a mask of self-righteous anger. We need that money, she hissed. The project needs grease. We have inspectors to pay off. We have suppliers who want cash up front. We are not going to let a liquidity crunch ruin us just because you are a miser. Now stand back and let the man work. I looked at the safe. It was a high-end model, biometric and digital. It was designed to withstand fire and flood, but it wasn't designed to withstand a diamond-tipped drill for 20 minutes. Inside that safe, there was no cash. I didn't keep cash. I wasn't a criminal. Inside that safe was one thing, a single black box containing my encrypted hard drives and my corporate seal, and a stack of my new business cards. If they opened it, they wouldn't find money. They would find the truth, or at least a hint of it. I leaned against the doorframe. I crossed my arms. Go ahead, I said. Courtney blinked. She had expected a fight. She had expected me to scream, to call the police, to throw myself in front of the drill. My resignation confused her. What she asked suspiciously. Open it, I said. If you think there is money in there, go ahead. Take it. Courtney narrowed her eyes. She was trying to figure out the angle, but her greed overpowered her caution. She turned back to the locksmith. You heard her, she yelled. Drill it. Now. The man turned back to the safe. The noise started up again. It was deafening. I watched as the metal shavings curled onto the floor. I watched Courtney pacing back and forth, wringing her hands. She was salivating. She was probably imagining stacks of $100 bills. She was imagining saving the day, walking into her father's office and dumping the cash on his desk, proving she was the smart one. It took 10 more minutes, 10 minutes of excruciating noise. Finally, there was a loud pop. The locking mechanism gave way. Got it, the locksmith said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Courtney practically shoved him out of the way. She dropped to her knees in her pristine white tennis skirt, ruining the fabric on the dusty floor. She didn't care. She grabbed the heavy steel handle and yanked the door open. She reached inside, her hands grasping for the cash. I watched her face. I watched the anticipation turn to confusion, then to shock, and finally to unbridled rage. She pulled her hand out. She wasn't holding a stack of money. She was holding nothing. It is empty, she screamed. Her voice cracked. She shoved her head into the safe, looking into the dark corners. There is nothing here. Where is it? Where is the money, Solange? I didn't move. I didn't speak. Courtney stood up, her face red. She kicked the open door of the safe. You moved it, she accused, pointing a shaking finger at me. You knew we were coming. You moved the cash. Where is it? Is it under the floorboards? Is it in the freezer? I am not a drug dealer, Courtney, I said quietly. I use a bank. Like a normal person. Liar, she shrieked. Trevon said you have money. He knows you have money. You pay for things. You paid that hospital bill. You have a stash. Tell me where it is. She began to tear the room apart. She pulled books off the shelves, shaking them to see if money fell out. She ripped the drawers out of my desk, dumping pens and paper clips onto the floor. She was frantic. She was desperate. Then she saw it. In the back of the safe, there was a small velvet tray. She had missed it in her initial frenzy. She grabbed it. Her eyes lit up. "Aha," she said. "I knew it. Jewelry, diamonds, something." She tipped the tray over onto the desk. There were no diamonds. There were no rubies. There was a single rectangular card, heavy stock, matte black, silver embossed lettering. Courtney picked it up. She frowned. She turned it over in her hand. She read the text out loud. Archangel Data, Forensic Auditing and Crisis Management. She looked at the name in the corner, Solange A. Davis, founder and CEO. She stared at it for a long time. The silence in the room was heavy. The locksmith was packing up his tools, trying to make himself invisible. Then Courtney started to laugh. It started as a giggle and erupted into a full-blown cackle. She threw her head back, laughing until she gasped for air. She looked at me, tears of mirth streaming down her face. "This," she gasped, waving the card. "This is your big secret. This is what you keep in a safe." I watched her. I waited. She wiped her eyes, looking at me with a smirk that was pure venom. "CEO," she mocked. "Founder. Oh, Solange, this is precious. This is truly sad." She walked over to me, getting right in my face. "Is this your little fantasy business?" she asked. "Is this what you do when you are pretending to work? You print up fake business cards so you can feel important." "Archangel Data. What does that even mean? Do you fix computers for the church?" She flicked the card at my chest. It hit me and fluttered to the floor. Or maybe she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "Maybe you are the janitor. Is that it? Do you clean the offices at this Archangel place? Did you steal a box of their cards from the trash so you could pretend to be one of them?" The insult hung in the air. It was so specific, so steeped in the history of prejudice that it almost took my breath away. She saw a black woman with a business card, and her first instinct was that I must have stolen it from the trash while mopping the floor. She did not see me as an equal. She did not even see me as a threat. She saw me as a joke. I looked down at the card on the floor. The silver letters caught the light. I looked back up at Courtney. I didn't get angry. I felt a strange sense of pity. She was standing on the edge of a cliff, and she was mocking the gravity. "You can keep the card, Courtney," I said. "You might need the number later." Courtney laughed again, stepping over the card as if it were trash. "I do not need a cleaning lady, Solange," she said. "I need cash, and since you are useless and broke, I am going to have to go tell my husband that we are screwed. Thanks for nothing." She turned to the locksmith. "Let's go," she snapped. "Send the bill to Trevon." She marched out of the room, kicking a pile of books on her way out. The locksmith mumbled an apology and hurried after her. I stood alone in the wreckage of my office. My sanctuary was destroyed. My safe was gaping open like a wound. My books were scattered, but they had left the one thing that mattered. I bent down and picked up the card. I brushed a speck of dust off the silver lettering. They thought it was a fantasy. They thought it was a joke. They didn't know that Archangel Data was the company that had just been hired by the Securities and Exchange Commission to investigate the very project Courtney was trying to grease. They didn't know that the signature on this card was the same signature on the subpoena that was currently being printed in my downtown office. Courtney had held the weapon that would kill her family's legacy in her hand, and she had thrown it on the floor because she was too blinded by hate to see it. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Atlanta. They wanted cash. They wanted grease. I was going to give them something much worse. I was going to give them an audit. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the destroyed safe. I took a picture of the broken lock. I took a picture of the mess. Then I opened my secure messaging app. I sent the photos to Jessica. Caption evidence of illegal entry and attempted grand larceny. Add it to the file. Jessica replied instantly. "Copy that. Do you want to call the police?" I typed back. "No. Let them run. Let them think they got away with it. I want them to feel safe. I want them to sleep soundly tonight, because tomorrow I am going to wake them up." I put the phone away. I looked at the safe one last time. I didn't bother closing it. There was no point. The secret was out even if they didn't understand it yet. I walked out of the office and closed the door. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. My heart was slow. The theft had failed, but the trap had worked perfectly. Courtney had just confirmed everything I needed to know. They were broke. They were desperate. And they were sloppy. They thought I was a janitor. I took a sip of water and smiled into the empty room. I am the janitor, I whispered, and I am about to clean up the trash. It was 9 a.m. on a Wednesday when my husband decided to end our marriage. He did not do it with a conversation. He did not do it with a letter. He did it with a moving truck and an eviction notice. I was sitting at the kitchen island drinking black coffee and watching the sunlight hit the granite countertops. It was a beautiful morning, the kind of morning that usually promised a fresh start. But the air in the apartment was stale. It smelled of secrets and impending doom. Trevon walked into the kitchen. He was dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, the kind he wore when he was trying to impress investors. He was not wearing his wedding ring. I noticed that detail immediately. He stopped by the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water, cracking the seal with a loud snap that echoed in the silent room. He did not look at me. He looked at his watch. "You are still in your pajamas," he said. His tone was casual, bored even. "You really should get dressed, Solange. The movers will be here in 20 minutes. I set my coffee cup down. "Movers?" I asked calmly. "We are not moving Trevon." He finally turned to look at me. His face was a mask of fake pity. It was the same expression he wore when he told his employees they were being laid off right before Christmas. "Oh, right," he said, scratching his chin. "I forgot to tell you. I got the call from the bank this morning. It is bad news, babe. Really bad news." He walked over to the island and leaned against it, invading my space but refusing to make eye contact. "They called the loan," he said. "The bridge loan. The one we used the apartment to secure. Apparently the market valuation on this place tanked overnight. The bank got spooked. They triggered the immediate foreclosure clause. They are taking the apartment, Solange. Today." I watched him lie. It was fascinating in a morbid way. He was so bad at it. He was twitchy. He was sweating slightly despite the air conditioning. He thought I was financially illiterate. He thought I did not know that foreclosure processes took months, not hours. He thought I did not know that banks do not just seize property at 9 a.m. because of a market fluctuation. But I played along. I needed to hear the full extent of his cruelty. "They cannot just take it, Trevon," I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. "This is my home. We have rights. We can fight this." Trevon shook his head, sighing dramatically. "I tried, babe. I really did. I was on the phone with them for an hour. But the paperwork you signed, remember the power of attorney, it gave them broad rights. You signed away the protections, Solange. I told you it was risky, but you wanted to help the company right. He was blaming me. He was rewriting history in real time. He was twisting my coerced signature into a foolish mistake that I had made. So what does that mean, I asked. Where do we go?" Trevon took a sip of water. He took a long time to swallow. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "that is the other thing. My parents offered to let us stay at the estate. You know, in the guest wing." I nodded. "Okay, so we go to your parents. I can pack a bag." Trevon held up a hand. "Actually, no," he said. "Not we. Me." The room went deadly silent. The refrigerator hummed. A siren wailed in the distance. "Excuse me," I whispered. "My mother," he said, shrugging. "You know how she is, Solange. She is very particular. She is still upset about the wedding, about the ambulance. She thinks you are bad luck. She said I can come home. She said Courtney and Julian can come stay for a while until the company stabilizes. But she was very clear about the guest list." He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw the pure, unadulterated malice in his eyes. "No wives allowed," he said. "Especially not you." I stared at him. He was kicking me out. He had stolen the deed to my apartment. He thought leveraged it for millions of dollars, and now that he had the cash, he was discarding me like a used wrapper. "So I am homeless," I stated flatly. "You effectively sold my apartment, and now you are leaving me on the street." "It is not like that," he said, defensive now. "You have friends. You can go stay with that girl from the library, or go back to the South Side. You are a survivor, Solange. You are scrappy. You will figure it out. I have to think about the business. I have to think about the legacy. I cannot be dragging dead weight around while I am trying to save an empire. Dead weight. That was what I was to him. 2 years of supporting him. 2 years of listening to his dreams. 2 years of dimming my own light so he could shine. And I was dead weight. I stood up. I walked over to the sink and rinsed my coffee cup. I dried my hands on a towel. I moved slowly, deliberately. "Trevon," I said, turning back to him, "we are married. You cannot just abandon your wife. The law does not work like that. You have a legal obligation to me. Half of what you have is mine. Half of that company is mine." Trevon laughed. It was a loud, barking laugh. He threw his head back. He looked at me with genuine amusement. "Oh, Solange," he said, wiping a tear from his eye. "You really are naive, aren't you?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the granite island. It slid across the smooth surface and stopped right in front of me. "Open it," he challenged. I picked it up. It was a marriage license application. Our marriage license application. I looked at the bottom. It was signed by me. It was signed by him. It was signed by the officiant. But there was no stamp. There was no filing date. There was no clerk's seal. "We never filed it," Trevon said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. I froze. I looked up at him. "I kept meaning to drop it off at the courthouse," he said, smiling. "But I got busy. The merger, the wedding planning, it just slipped my mind. And then after the wedding with the hospital and everything, I started thinking, maybe it was a sign. Maybe we moved too fast." He walked over to me, getting close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "So legally speaking," he whispered, "you are not my wife. You are just a girlfriend who made a bad real estate deal." He stepped back, looking triumphant. "So no, Solange. You do not get half the company. You do not get alimony. You do not get a seat at the table. You get nothing. You are nobody. You are a ghost." He checked his watch again. "You have about 15 minutes before the movers get here. I suggest you pack whatever fits in your car. Anything left behind goes to the dump." He turned his back on me. He walked toward the living room, whistling a tune. He was happy. He felt light. He had shed the burden. He had won. I stood there holding the unfiled marriage license. I looked at the paper. I looked at his signature. And then I felt it. A bubble of laughter rising in my chest. It started low and deep. It rumbled up my throat. I tried to suppress it, but I couldn't. It burst out of me. A loud, clear, genuine laugh. Trevon stopped whistling. He turned around slowly. He looked confused. He expected tears. He expected screaming. He expected me to fall to my knees and beg. He did not expect laughter. "What is so funny?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Have you finally snapped? Did the stress break your little mind?" I shook my head, wiping my eyes. I walked around the island. I walked straight up to him. I stood tall in my silk pajamas, looking him dead in the eye. "No, Trevon," I said, smiling. "I am not broken. I am relieved." I held up the paper. "You are telling me the truth I asked. You really never filed this. We are 100% legally strangers." 100%, he said warily, unnerved by my reaction. "You are a single woman, Solange. You have no claim on me." I took a deep breath. It felt like the first clean breath I had taken in years. "Thank you," I said. Trevon blinked. "What?" "Thank you," I repeated. I stepped closer to him. My voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and deadly. "Thank you for being too lazy to file the paperwork. Thank you for being too arrogant to check my background. And thank you for giving me this gift." "What are you talking about?" he snapped, stepping back. "If we were married, Trevon," I said, walking him backward toward the door. "If we were legally married, I would be responsible for your debts. I would be liable for the fraud you committed. I would be on the hook for the $5 million you stole from the syndicate." His eyes went wide. "But since we are not married," I continued, enjoying the fear dawning on his face. "Since I am just a nobody, as you said, I am free. My assets are safe. My $60 million is safe. My company is safe." He froze. $60 million. "What?" I laughed again. "You really should have Googled me, Trevon. You really should have looked past the Honda Civic." I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "Get out," I said. "Excuse me," he sputtered. "This is my house. The bank took it. I am kicking you out." "No," I said, leaning against the doorframe. The bank did not take it. Because the power of attorney you used to get the loan was fake, I signed it with a variant signature. It is void. The loan is void. The foreclosure is void. I pointed to the floor. This apartment still belongs to me, solely to me, which means you are trespassing. Trevon turned purple. That is a lie. I saw you sign it. Courtney saw you sign it. You saw what you wanted to see, I said. Just like you saw a poor librarian when you should have seen a shark. I checked my imaginary watch, mimicking his earlier gesture. You have exactly 1 minute to get out of my house before I call the police. And Trevon, since we are not married, I do not have to worry about spousal privilege. I can testify against you. And I will. I will tell them about the poison. I will tell them about the fraud. I will tell them everything. Trevon stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. His world was crumbling. The narrative he had built was dissolving, but he still had one card to play. Or so he thought. You are bluffing, he spat. You are lying. You are just trying to scare me. I am leaving. But I am coming back with the police, and I am taking this place. He stormed past me, bumping my shoulder. He walked out into the hallway. Oh, and Trevon, I called out after him. He stopped turning around one last time. Do not go to your parents' house, I said. Why? He snarled. Are you going to burn it down? No, I said, smiling sweetly. But I did buy the mortgage note on their estate this morning. Archangel Data owns it now. And since your mother missed 3 payments last year, I initiated foreclosure proceedings an hour ago. I pulled the door handle. They are being evicted at noon. You might want to hurry. You can all be homeless together. I slammed the door in his face. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. It was done. The marriage was over. The gloves were off. I was not a wife anymore. I was a creditor. And business was about to pick up. The glass walls of the conference room on the top floor of Davis Logistics offered a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline. It was a view reserved for winners, or at least for people who thought they had won. Inside, the air conditioning was humming a low, steady note that competed with the sound of crystal glasses clinking together. Trevon sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He had his feet up on the polished wood. He was holding a glass of 25-year-old scotch, swirling the amber liquid around ice cubes that cost more than my first car. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had just escaped a firing squad and convinced himself he was bulletproof. Sitting around him were the co-conspirators. Courtney was to his right, flipping through a travel brochure for the Maldives. Julian was on his left, typing furiously on his phone, probably transferring the funds from the loan they thought they had secured. And Patricia, my mother-in-law, was inspecting her nails, looking bored but satisfied. They were celebrating the death of my future. They were celebrating the theft of my apartment. They were celebrating the fact that they had successfully discarded the dead weight. I watched them for a moment through the glass. I was standing in the elevator lobby, my hand hovering over the biometric scanner. Behind me stood 6 of the most terrifying people in the corporate world. They were not hitmen. They were worse. They were forensic auditors. My team, the Archangels. They were dressed in identical charcoal suits. They carried briefcases that contained enough evidence to put half the city council in prison. They were silent. They were efficient. And they answered only to me. I looked at my reflection in the glass doors. The woman staring back at me was not the Solange Trevon knew. That Solange wore cardigan sweaters and sensible flats. That Solange pulled her hair back in a messy bun. That Solange tried to make herself small so her husband could feel big. The woman in the reflection was sharp. My hair had been cut an hour ago into a severe asymmetrical bob that framed my face like a helmet of war. I was wearing a white bespoke suit from a designer in Milan who didn't sell to people like Courtney. My heels were stiletto daggers. My lips were painted a deep crimson. I pressed my thumb against the scanner. The light turned green. I did not work here. I was not an employee. But Archangel Data had high-level clearance. We had clearance because 6 months ago, in a panic over his failing numbers, Trevon had hired an external auditing firm to cook his books. He had hired the best firm in the city. He just didn't know who owned it. The glass doors slid open with a soft hiss. I stepped into the hallway. My team fell into formation behind me, a V shape of legal destruction. The sound of our heels on the marble floor was like a drumbeat. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah who had always looked at me with pity when I came to bring Trevon lunch, looked up. Her eyes went wide. She started to stand up, reaching for the phone. "Mrs. Davis," she stammered. Solange, you cannot go in there. Mr. Davis said, "No visitors, especially you." I did not stop walking. I did not even look at her. "Sit down, Sarah," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "And do not touch that phone." Sarah sat down. She dropped her hand from the receiver as if it were hot. I walked straight to the double doors of the conference room. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I pushed them open with both hands, throwing them wide. The conversation inside stopped instantly. Trevon froze with his glass halfway to his mouth. Courtney dropped her brochure. Julian looked up from his phone. Patricia turned her head so fast her neck cracked. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. They just stared. They were trying to process what they were seeing. They were trying to reconcile the image of the broke, desperate wife they had just evicted with the powerhouse standing in their doorway, flanked by a phalanx of grim-faced suits. Trevon was the first to recover, or at least the first to speak. He slammed his glass down on the table, spilling scotch onto the expensive wood. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked. He stood up, his face flushing red. "I told you to get lost, Solange. I told you we are done." "Security." He reached for the intercom button on the table. "Don't bother," I said, stepping into the room. "Security works for the building management." And building management just gave me a master key. I tossed a heavy brass keyring onto the center of the table. It landed with a loud thud, sliding across the mahogany until it hit Courtney's water glass. Trevon looked at the keys, then back at me. He laughed. It was a nervous sound. "You broke in," he said, pointing a finger at me. "That is breaking and entering. You are stalking me, Solange. This is pathetic. Look at you, trying to play dress-up in a borrowed suit. Who are these people? Actors. Did you hire actors to scare me?" Courtney stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on the cut of my jacket. I saw a flicker of jealousy, but she buried it under a layer of sneering contempt. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head. "This is embarrassing even for you. Solange, go home. Go back to the shelter, or wherever you are staying. We are in a board meeting. We are discussing millions of dollars. We do not have time for your little drama." She looked at the auditors behind me. "And you clowns," she sneered. "Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing. Do you know who my father is?" My lead auditor, a man named Marcus who had formerly worked for the IRS and had a heart made of stone, didn't even blink. He just adjusted his glasses and looked at me, waiting for the command. I walked further into the room. I pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table facing Trevon. I didn't sit down. I stood there gripping the back of the leather chair, my knuckles resting against the upholstery. "I am not here as your wife Trevon," I said. My voice was cool, filling the room. "And I am certainly not here to beg." "Then why are you here?" Trevon shouted. "Get out, now!" "I am here because of the contract you signed 6 months ago," I said. Trevon frowned. "What contract?" "The contract with Archangel Data," I said. "The one where you hired an external firm to audit your logistics supply chain and optimize your tax liabilities. You paid a $50,000 retainer. Do you remember that?" Trevon blinked. "Yeah, so I hired a firm. What does that have to do with you? Are you the secretary now? Is that your new job? Did you get a job answering phones for them?" Courtney laughed. "Oh, that makes sense. She is the receptionist. That explains the suit. She probably stole it from the lost and found." I smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. I looked at Marcus. "Marcus," I said, "please introduce us." Marcus stepped forward. He placed a heavy black briefcase on the table. The sound of the latches snapping open echoed in the room like gunshots. He opened the lid and pulled out a stack of documents 3 inches thick. He slid the documents down the table. They came to a rest right in front of Trevon. Mr. Davis Marcus said, his voice deep and gravelly, "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am the Senior Vice President of Auditing for Archangel Data, and this is the team you requested." Trevon looked at Marcus, then at the documents, then at me. He was struggling to connect the dots. "I do not understand," he stammered. "I hired Archangel Data. Why is she here? Why is my ex-wife here?" Because Marcus said, turning to look at me with absolute deference, "You are currently addressing the founder and chief executive officer of Archangel Data." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, but before the building collapses. Trevon looked at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Courtney froze. Her hand went to her throat. She looked at the business card she had thrown on the floor of my office the night before, the one she had mocked, the one she had called a fake. Patricia spoke for the first time. Her voice was trembling. "That is a lie," she whispered. "That is impossible. Solange is a nobody. She drives a Honda. She works at a library." I walked around the table slowly, my heels clicking against the floor. I walked until I was standing right next to Trevon. I leaned in close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. "I drove a Honda because I liked it," I said softly. "And I worked at the library because I was archiving the city's historical records as a philanthropic project. I donated my salary to the reading program every month." I reached out and picked up Trevon's glass of scotch. I held it up to the light, inspecting the color. "You see, Trevon," I said, "I never told you I was poor. You just assumed I was. You looked at my skin, you looked at my address, and you decided I was a project. You decided I was someone you could save. And then when you realized you couldn't save yourself, you decided I was someone you could use." I set the glass down, hard. "But you made a mistake," I said. "You hired the best forensic firm in the city to hide your dirt. You thought you were hiring strangers. You thought you were hiring people who would just take your money and look the other way." I gestured to my team. "But you hired me. You invited the fox into the henhouse, Trevon, and for the last 6 months while you were cheating on me, while you were planning to steal my apartment, while you were buying poison on the dark web, I have been reading your emails. I have been tracking your bank transfers. I have been watching you dig your own grave." Trevon sank back into his chair. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. You own Archangel Data," he whispered. I nodded. 100%. Then you know," he said, his voice barely audible. "I know everything," I said. I looked at Julian. "I know about the shell companies and the Caymans, Julian. I know about the $2 million you siphoned off the construction budget." Julian dropped his phone. It clattered onto the table. I looked at Courtney. "I know about the Porsche, Courtney, the one listed as a delivery truck. And I know about the $50,000 in consulting fees you paid yourself last month for interior design services that were never rendered." Courtney went pale. She shrank back in her chair, trying to make herself invisible. "And Patricia," I said, turning to the matriarch, "I know about the charity gala, the one where you raised $100,000 for orphans. I know the money never made it to the orphanage. I know it went to pay off your gambling debts at the casino in Biloxi." Patricia gasped, clutching her pearls. "How dare you? That is private. It is not private when you launder it through the company accounts," I said. "That makes it corporate fraud. And since Archangel Data was hired to audit the company accounts, it makes it my business." I turned back to Trevon. "So here is the situation," I said. "I am not here to crash your party. I am here to work." I snapped my fingers. Marcus stepped forward again, pulling out another document. "This is a formal notice of a hostile takeover," Marcus said, sliding the paper to Trevon. Trevon looked at the paper. "Hostile takeover," he said, his voice cracking. "You cannot do that. I own 51% of the shares. You cannot take my company." I smiled. "Actually, I can," I said. "Because you see, Trevon, you defaulted on a loan. A very big loan." I saw the recognition dawn in his eyes. The $5 million. The syndicate. You know about Thorne," he whispered. "I bought the debt, Trevon," I said. "I bought it this morning. Archangel Data purchased the promissory note from the holding company that manages the syndicate's assets." I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I own your debt, which means I own your collateral. And since you put up your majority stake in this company as collateral for the loan, I plucked the scotch glass from the table and poured the liquid onto the floor right next to his expensive Italian shoes. I own you. Trevon stared at the puddle of scotch soaking into the carpet. He looked up at me. His eyes were filled with tears, but not tears of remorse, tears of terror. "Solange, please," he begged. "We can work this out. We are family." I laughed. It was the same laugh I had laughed in the apartment. "No, Trevon," I said, straightening my jacket. "We are not family. We are not even married, remember? You never filed the license." I pointed to the door. "Now get out of my chair." Trevon didn't move. He couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the magnitude of his failure. Courtney stood up. She was shaking. "You cannot do this!" she screamed shrilly. "This is illegal. You are stealing our company. I am calling my father." "Go ahead," I said. "Call the senator. Ask him if he wants to be associated with a family that is about to be indicted for racketeering, embezzlement, and attempted murder." Courtney stopped. Her hand hovered over her phone. "Attempted murder," she whispered. I looked at Trevon. "We will get to that," I said. "But first we have some accounting to do." I sat down at the head of the table. I spun the leather chair around so I was facing the window, facing the city that I now owned a piece of. I spun back around facing them. I looked at my team. "Start the audit," I commanded. Marcus and the other 5 auditors stepped forward, opening their briefcases in unison. They began to pull out laptops, files, and scanners. They moved like a machine. They took over the table, pushing Trevon's drink and Courtney's brochures onto the floor. I looked at Trevon. "You can stay if you want," I said, "but you might want to call a lawyer, a criminal lawyer, because by the time we are done with this meeting, you are going to need one." Trevon put his head in his hands. I watched him crumble. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Trevon slammed his hand against the mahogany table so hard that the remaining ice in his glass rattled against the crystal. His face was a map of broken ego and rising panic. He pointed a trembling finger at the door, his voice cracking with the desperation of a man watching his kingdom crumble. "Security!" he roared, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Get in here right now! Remove this woman immediately! I want her arrested for trespassing!" He looked toward the double doors, waiting for the heavy footsteps of the building guards. He waited for the men in uniform to come and drag his wife away so he could go back to pretending he was a king. But the doors did not open. The hallway remained silent. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the server banks in the corner and the ragged breathing of my mother-in-law, Patricia, who looked like she was about to faint. I stood there calmly smoothing the lapel of my white suit. I looked at Trevon with a mixture of pity and amusement. "Security is not coming, Trevon," I said, my voice dropping to a level that forced everyone to lean in. "What do you mean they are not coming?" he sputtered, slamming the intercom button again. "I pay the lease here. I pay for security." "No," I said, stepping closer to the table until I was towering over him. "You pay a maintenance fee to the building management. But the security contract for this entire skyscraper was renegotiated last month. And do you know who holds the contract for the security personnel?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "Archangel Data," I whispered. Trevon froze. His hand hovered over the button. "That is right," I continued. "The men standing in the lobby downstairs, the guards monitoring the elevators. They do not work for you, Trevon. They work for me. They work for the woman you tried to throw out on the street." Trevon sank back into his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. But his eyes darted to the side, landing on Courtney. He was looking for an exit. He was looking for a leverage point. "But you signed it," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The power of attorney. You signed it last night. I saw you. Courtney saw you. That document gives me control, Solange. It gives me control over everything, including your little company. I can fire you. I can dissolve Archangel Data. I own you." He was grasping at straws. He was clinging to the one victory he thought he had secured. I shook my head slowly. "The paper you forced me to sign," I asked. "The one you tried to use to steal my grandmother's apartment this morning." I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer and pulled out a photocopy of the document he had waved in my face at the hospital. I tossed it onto the table. It landed next to his spilled scotch. Look at the signature, Trevon, I said. He looked down. He stared at the ink. It looks like my name, I said. It looks like Solange Davis. But look closer. Look at the S. Look at the angle of the loop. And most importantly, look at the missing middle initial. Trevon squinted. I do not understand. My legal signature includes my middle initial, Aaliyah, I explained. Solange A. Davis. Without that A, and with the forensic variance in the slant, that document is nothing more than a scrap of paper. It is a forgery. It is void. The bank rejected it at 9:05 a.m. this morning. That is why they called the loan Trevon. Not because of the market, but because they realized you were trying to commit fraud with a worthless piece of paper. Trevon went pale. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. So it is fake, he whispered. It is invalid, I corrected, just like your authority over me. I walked around the table, slowly circling him like a predator, but I continued, my voice sharpening. There is one contract that is very valid. There is one document that you signed with your own hand freely and willingly, a document that is binding in every court in the state of Georgia. I stopped behind his chair. I leaned down, whispering into his ear. The engagement letter you signed 6 months ago with Archangel Data. Trevon whipped his head around. What, he gasped. 6 months ago, I said, straightening up and addressing the room. You were in trouble. The logistics company was bleeding money. You needed to hide the losses from the board. You needed to cook the books before the quarterly review. So you did what every corrupt CEO does. You hired an external auditing firm to clean up the mess. I looked at Courtney. You recommended them, didn't you, Courtney? You told him to hire Archangel Data because you heard they were the best. You heard they were discreet. Courtney nodded dumbly, her mouth hanging open. You were right, I said. We are the best. But you forgot to check who owned the firm. I walked back to the head of the table. I placed my hands on the leather surface, claiming the space. You hired my company, Trevon. You paid me a $50,000 retainer to audit your own business. You gave my team full access to your servers. You gave us your passwords. You gave us the keys to the kingdom because you thought we were strangers who would cover for you. I signaled to Marcus. Show him, I said. Marcus opened the second file. He pulled out a stack of spreadsheets. They were color-coded, red for illegal, black for legitimate. The page was almost entirely red. For 6 months, I said, picking up a page, I have been watching you. I have been watching you funnel company profits into a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. I have watched you falsify shipping manifests to claim revenue for cargo that never existed. I flipped the page. I saw the wire transfer to the car dealership for Courtney's Porsche. You labeled it as heavy machinery purchase. I looked at Courtney, who was now trembling so hard her bracelets were rattling. And I saw the payments to the syndicate. I continued looking back at Trevon. $5 million borrowed from loan sharks, laundered through the employee pension fund. You stole from your own workers' retirement to pay off your gambling debts. Trevon looked at the papers. He looked at the undeniable proof of his crimes laid out in black and white. You knew, he stammered. You knew this whole time. I nodded. Every night when you came home and lied to me about your day, I knew, I said. Every time you told me we had to tighten our belts while you were buying $5,000 suits, I knew. And every time you called me stupid or made fun of my job at the library, I smiled because I knew that the files on my server were growing thicker by the day. I leaned forward. I wasn't just your wife, Trevon. I was your auditor. And you are the worst client I have ever had. The room was silent. The weight of the revelation was crushing them. They had thought I was a victim. They had thought I was prey. They didn't realize that for 6 months they had been hand-feeding the evidence of their own destruction to the one person who had the power to use it. You trapped us, Julian whispered, his face gray. I didn't trap you, I said coldly. I just handed you the rope. You are the ones who tied the noose. You are the ones who decided to jump. Trevon stood up slowly. His legs were shaking. Solange, he said, his voice cracking. Baby, please, we can fix this. I can pay it back. We can make a deal. I laughed. A short, sharp sound. A deal, I asked. You want to make a deal? Like the deal you tried to make with my apartment. Like the deal you tried to make with my life when you put poison in my glass. I pointed to the documents. There are no more deals, Trevon. The audit is complete, the evidence is finalized, and the authorities are already on their way. I checked my watch. They should be stepping out of the elevator right about now. Trevon looked at the door. The fear in his eyes was absolute. He wasn't looking at his wife anymore. He was looking at his executioner, and he finally understood that the woman he had underestimated was the only one who had ever truly seen him. I reached into the pocket of my white blazer and pulled out a small silver remote control. I pointed it at the wall of glass behind Trevon, where a recessed projector screen began to descend from the ceiling with a low, mechanical hum. The room went silent. Trevon looked at the screen, then back at me, confusion warring with the terror already etched onto his face. "You said you wanted proof?" "Trevon?" I said, my voice steady and cold. "You said you wanted to know why I refused to sign your papers, why I refused to save you, why I am standing here today taking everything you built. Well, I believe in transparency, so let us watch a little home movie together." I pressed the play button. The screen flickered to life. The resolution was crystal clear. 4K video captured from the high-definition camera, hidden inside the vintage gold flower brooch I had worn on our wedding day. The angle was slightly low, looking up from my chest, but it captured everything perfectly. On the screen, the ballroom was bathed in soft, romantic light. We saw Trevon's, hands nervous and fidgeting. We saw him reach into his tuxedo pocket. We saw the packet of white powder. The camera zoomed in digitally on the freeze frame, showing the granular texture of the synthetic scopolamine hitting the champagne bubbles. It sizzled, dissolving instantly into the golden liquid. In the conference room, Trevon let out a strangled sound. He scrambled out of his chair, knocking it backward. "No!" he shouted. "That is a lie. That is deep. Fake technology. You doctored that. Sit down. Trevon Marcus." My lead auditor barked, stepping forward and placing a heavy hand on Trevon's shoulder, forcing him back into his seat. "Watch the movie." On the screen, the video continued. It showed the switch. It showed me distracting him. It showed him drinking the poisoned glass. And then it cut to a new angle. This one was audio-heavy. It was the recording from the hospital room. The voice of Courtney was shrill and unmistakable. "Sign it, Solange, or I will tell the press you are an adulterer. We need that money to bribe the zoning commissioner. My father can make this all go away, but you have to sign." I paused the video. The image of Courtney snarling at me was frozen on the giant screen looming over the real Courtney, who was now trembling so violently that her teeth were chattering. I turned to Courtney. "You mentioned your father quite a lot that night," I said, walking over to her. "I wonder how Senator Miller is going to feel when this video is played on the evening news tonight. I wonder how his constituents will feel, knowing his daughter attempts to blackmail women into signing fraudulent property deeds to cover up bribes." Courtney stood up, her face paper white. "You would not dare," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You cannot release that. It will destroy him. It will destroy our family legacy. Your legacy is already dead." "Courtney," I said, "the only question is whether you want to go to prison quietly or if you want to be dragged out screaming." Before she could answer, the double doors of the conference room opened again. But this time it was not my auditors. It was not a secretary. 2 men in dark suits walked in, followed by 4 uniformed officers of the Atlanta Police Department. The man in front flashed a gold badge. "Trevon Davis." Detective Miller announced, his voice booming through the room. "You are under arrest for attempted assault with a deadly substance wire fraud and racketeering. We also have a warrant for Courtney Davis for extortion and conspiracy to commit fraud." Trevon looked at the handcuffs swinging from the officer's belt. He looked at me, pleading. "Solange, please tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we are married. You cannot let them take me." I looked at him. I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no anger, just the cold satisfaction of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. "I cannot help you, Trevon," I said softly. "I am just a witness, and the evidence speaks for itself." The officers moved in. They pulled Trevon from his chair, forcing his hands behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world, As they dragged him past me, he locked eyes with me one last time. Why, he asked, tears running down his face. Why did you do this? Because you tried to take my voice, I said. And now I am taking your freedom. As they let him out, Courtney began to scream. She was trying to call her father, but an officer snatched the phone from her hand, slapping cuffs on her wrists. Her screams echoed down the hallway, a pathetic soundtrack to the end of their dynasty. When the doors closed, silence returned to the room. My auditors were still typing. The police had done their job. Now it was time to finish mine. I walked back to the head of the table where Patricia, my mother-in-law, was sitting alone. She was not arrested. She was just an old woman watching her world burn. She looked at me with hatred. "Are you happy?" she hissed. "You sent my children to prison. You ruined us." I ignored her. I picked up a document from Marcus. It was the buyout agreement. "I am not done yet, Patricia," I said. I looked at the remaining board members who were cowering in the corner. "The company is bankrupt. The assets are frozen. The reputation is destroyed. The stock is worth zero. Actually, it is worth less than zero because of the debt I own." I held up the contract. "However, I am willing to be generous. I will acquire 100% of Davis Logistics. I will absorb the debt, and I will prevent the immediate liquidation of the employee pension fund. I will save the jobs of the innocent people who work here." "And what do you give us?" Patricia asked, eyeing the contract greedily, expecting a payout. "What is the offer price?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single silver dollar coin. I flicked it onto the mahogany table. It spun on its edge, humming before slapping down flat, right in front of her. $1, I said. Patricia stared at the coin. $1, she repeated, indignity coloring her cheeks. "This company has been in our family for 40 years, and your son destroyed it in 6 months," I countered. "Take the dollar, Patricia, or I let the bank foreclose on your personal estate tomorrow morning. The choice is yours." She looked at the coin. She looked at the empty chairs where her children had sat moments ago. With a shaking hand, she picked up the pen and signed the company over to me. She grabbed the dollar coin, clutching it like a lifeline, and walked out of the room without looking back. I stood alone at the head of the table. I looked out the window at the city of Atlanta. The sun was shining. The company was mine. The debt was settled. The war was over. I turned to Marcus Clear, the room. I said, "I have work to do." 6 months later, I sat in the corner office on the top floor of the building formerly known as Davis Logistics. The sign on the wall now read, Archangel Data Global Headquarters. The mahogany desk was gone, replaced by sleek, modern glass. The dark, heavy curtains were gone, letting the light flood in. I was wearing a silk blouse, rolling the stem of a crystal flute between my fingers. It was filled with the same vintage champagne Trevon had served at our wedding, but this glass I had poured myself. I took a sip. The bubbles tasted crisp and clean. They tasted like victory. I swiveled my chair around to face the camera, looking directly at you. They thought I was a sheep. I said, my voice calm and reflective. They looked at my quiet demeanor, my sensible clothes, my desire to be a good wife, and they saw weakness. They saw a victim waiting to be fleeced. They thought they could shear me for my wool and then slaughter me for my meat. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the glass desk. But that is the mistake arrogant people always make. They forget that wolves do not always howl. Sometimes they sit quietly in the corner watching, waiting, and taking notes. They forget that the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting orders. It is the one listening to the whispers. Trevon is currently serving a 15-year sentence in a medium-security federal prison. Courtney is out on bail, but her father's political career is over, and she is currently working as a hostess at a diner because no reputable company will hire her. And me. I gestured to the sprawling skyline behind me. I'm just getting started. We took the broken pieces of their company and turned it into a fortress protecting people from predators like them. We created a fund for women who have been financially abused, helping them regain their independence, one audit at a time. I raised my glass to the camera, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. So here is the lesson. If you ever find yourself sitting at a table where respect is not being served, leave the table. And if they try to block your exit, buy the building. If you enjoyed watching me turn the tables on a husband who thought I was nothing more than a stepping stone, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own power, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice served. Cold. I am Solange Davis, and I am signing off. Remember, check your glass, check your bank accounts, and never let anyone tell you what you are worth. Cheers. Solange's story serves as a masterclass in the power of strategic silence and the fatal error of underestimation. The Davis family made the classic mistake of confusing humility with poverty and kindness with weakness. They believed that power was something you displayed through loud parties, expensive cars, and arrogant titles. They failed to realize that true power is often quiet, observant, and patient. This narrative teaches us that your value is never defined by how others perceive you. Trevon saw a struggling librarian because that is what his ego needed to see. He needed someone lesser to make himself feel big. However, Solange proves that when you know your own worth, both your net worth and your self-worth, you do not need to perform for an audience. You do not need to brag about your assets to validate your existence. Furthermore, the story highlights the critical importance of financial literacy as a shield against abuse. Solange didn't defeat her husband with violence or screaming matches. She defeated him with audits, contracts, and forensic evidence. She turned the legal system, which they tried to use as a weapon against her, into her greatest ally. It is a reminder that in a world full of noise, the most dangerous person in the room is the one who is taking notes. True revenge isn't about stooping to the level of your abuser. It is about elevating yourself to a position where they can no longer reach you. Solange shows us that sometimes the best way to win the war is to let your enemy think they have already won right up until the moment you hand them the bill. If this story inspired you to move in silence and build your own empire, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to play the fool to catch a liar? I want to hear your story.